all today. And we are coming up in five, three. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a blessing to be with you on Veterans Day. Originally, it was known as Armistice Day. What is Armistice? It's a call to end arms, a call to end war. How did we shift from Armistice Day to Veterans Day? How did we shift from, hmm, how did we make that shift? How did we go from Mother's Day for Peace just to Mother's Day? How do we move to these things? How do we move into these spaces? And what about veterans? How do they feel in this moment? Uh, I can't help but think Mike Ferner, Veterans for Peace, and Phil Tottenham, Veterans for Peace, sending you so much love, and Kathy Kelly, World Beyond War. I think of my grandfather today, my paternal grandfather. And the last time that I saw him alive, and indeed he died 6 months later, really at the tender age of 59. And I was standing in the room with him and my grandmother and my father and my Uncle Saint, who traveled with my father for 30 years and was with him for 50. And we were visiting our grandparents as people would do, Philip and Mike and Miss Kathy. And I had been away, I'd been out of the country for about 4.5, 5 months. So it was a particularly poignant trip because I was kind of getting my sea legs back in the United States. And my father, of course, was on his way back out of town. He was just dipping in to say hello to the kids and to his parents and all of that. And I thought my grandfather and my grandmother wanted a word alone with dad. And so I was about to ease on out the room. He said, "No, baby, I want you to stay. I want to talk about the war, the Second World War." I thought that was very interesting. And looking back at it was such a poignant moment because that was the last time that I saw him alive. We left maybe 2 days later. And he talked about going to the war and coming back. Number one, he was sent to the war because he was working for a white fellow in town who tried to humiliate him in front of my father, who was working alongside him. And when my grandfather rejected that, he walked down to the courthouse and had my grandfather conscripted. Point one. Then, point two, he came back from the war, having won the war, and they all boarded the train in New York as he was making his way to South Carolina. But something interesting happened when they got to Washington, D.C., before they officially crossed the Mason Dixon line. He and the other black soldiers, the GIs, had to go to the colored car, and they moved the German POWs forward. And then finally he said, but we had something that was very interesting. He said, "Baby, war is something you never want. It really is awful. I lost so many friends there. And these were the people who you depended upon for dear life. And they sent us into the camps, baby. They put us on the front line, but they sent us into the camps to save the Holocaust survivors." He said, "But they sent us into the camps because, A, they said, well, if they saw the black soldiers, the Holocaust survivors would they would know that they were not German." He said, but the real reason was because Auschwitz and Buchenwald and all of these places were really laden with landmines. So we would be killed first. So when I think of Armistice Day, when I think of Veterans Day, I think of that. And I think of a young white soldier who I saw talking to uh, a gentleman from the corporate media in the United States. They put them in the pads out there in the field in Vietnam. And he was asked, "Is there anything you'd like me to say to your family at home?" He said, "Yes. Would you tell the rich men to stop sending poor boys out to fight their wars?" There is another side to this, everybody. There's another side. There's a side of conscientious objectors. I think of my late uncle, Mickey Warren. He was one of those persons. James Orange, one of Dr. King's lieutenant, was another. Now let's talk about war today. War and peace. Let's talk about that. I guess that's my opening today, everybody, for Veterans Day, as I celebrate and honor all veterans. If they support war, I hear them. I hope that they will be supported when they come home. I know the enlistees are dealing with poverty, even as they serve. Too many of our bases have payday loan centers at the edges because our enlistees make no money and they're asked to give everything. So, Phil Tottenham, Mike Ferner, and Kathy Kelly, I welcome you back home to the show because you know you're home here. So, let me start with you, Mike Ferner, Veterans for Peace. What say you about this Veterans Day in 2025?
Well, I'd like to explain how we got from Armistice Day to Veterans Day briefly. In 2008, Veterans for Peace passed a resolution at our convention that originated with the Twin Cities chapter. Minneapolis, St. Paul submitted a resolution to start using the term Armistice Day. And they had a list of reasons why. But the long and the short of it is Armistice Day was observed for many years after 1918 when the World War I guns finally fell silent. And that ended an industrial slaughter on a scale the world had never seen. Over 30 million soldiers were killed, wounded, or taken captive, and 13 million civilians died. 2 years later, Congress passed a resolution calling for, and this is a quote from that resolution, calling for exercises designed to perpetuate peace through goodwill and mutual understanding, inviting the people of the United States to observe the day in schools and churches with appropriate ceremonies of friendly relations with all other peoples. Later, Congress added that November 11th was to be a day dedicated to the cause of world peace. And then in 1938, it became a federal holiday. But at the height of the Red Scare in the early 50s, the system was trying to get everybody scared to death of the Russians and keep the military industrial complex cranked up. And so part of what was done to really militarize all of society was to change Armistice Day to Veterans Day. And that has stuck till this time popularly. And it's one of the ways that the military is put up on a pedestal so that people don't question. And I can get into this in a minute, but just this afternoon, a friend of mine who's a high school teacher dropped off a couple of short letters from students who were asked to write to a veteran today. And I excerpted a few lines out of their letters, and it really shows how the really brainwashing has been so successful that these are two boys who just fit right into the mold of how the system hopes we all look at veterans. So and it's just one good typical example.
Would you like to share any of the letter?
Sure. Yeah, just a few lines from them. I understand that when you chose to serve, you too didn't know who you were serving. Boy, ain't that the truth. During your service, I wasn't even born, and yet I still feel grateful for the sacrifice you and so many others made in the betterment of the United States and all its people. Now, he was told that I served during the Vietnam War, and yet the myth that I was somehow serving for the betterment of the American people rings through, 2-3 generations later. And the other one, a little bit from it, says, risking your life for your family is a brave thing to do, but you risked your life for others who you will never know. And I asked the teacher who dropped those off, I said, how about if I write them back? And he said, "Oh, that'd be fine." And so I'm going to propose or put together a letter to each of them and gently explain that no, I didn't know who I was serving when I went in, and because I didn't know any bank presidents or oil company presidents, and that's who I was serving. And yeah, risking my life for others. Well, in my particular job, I didn't risk my life, but could have been a situation. But I wasn't risking my life for the betterment of anybody. I was risking my life for the people who were getting filthy rich off of that war and didn't care if we killed millions of people in Indochina. So, again, that's I mean, straight from the young person's mouth here. This is how our people are taught about the military, and yet we don't do any brainwashing in the United States.
Phil Tottenham, it seems that this was resonating with you. Why?
Oh yeah, I mean, right? We grew up believing that the United States is Superman, right? That we're this world hero, and taught that we're the world's police force, right? Um, and then after serving, for me, you slowly begin to find out who you were actually serving, and that it's the war pigs. And it's not coincidence that every time that there's a war, there are people that profit hand over fist. And it is what drives the wars. Capitalism is what drives the wars. And it's not, it's it's a package of lies sold through pride, packaged up and wrapped in the American flag, that we are tricked into killing other people, other human beings that are more like us than we have in common with the war pigs, with the profiteers that have been profiting from war for forever. And so that was the shift from World War One to World War Two, that we lost. Armistice Day, right? Was the capitalism portion of these war pigs that have no national boundaries at all. They only know money. And so to follow the money, and to find out, that we had been duped, it's a hard thing to face and to admit. You've got to swallow your pride and ego, and not just, the pride and ego that we survived childhood with, but the pride and ego that's instilled in us in boot camp, right before our prefrontal cortexes are fully developed at the years of 18, and they don't develop until they're 25, right? So instilling the things like I've said before, the chance at boot camp and young people's minds, and the Marines, ready to fight, ready to kill, ready to die, but never will. Like those chants of just brainwashing over and over, and how it tricks the prefrontal cortex. And then whoever the boogeyman is wherever the natural resources are that these private companies profit from. Well, these private companies are the same people that are donating money and hand over fist money to these politicians who are puppets for the war pigs. And so you can't serve two masters, right? These politicians don't serve us, the people, but we in the military and in the and veterans, we serve each other. We serve and we fight to keep each other alive. We don't fight for the war pigs. And that's, but coming to that realization of this is who we've been fighting for. And now to try to tell everybody, we have got to fight for humanity. We have got to, as we fought for the empire and serve the empire, which is serving the private corporations that are the puppet masters, is, yeah. I don't. It's hard to put into words, and Mike did a great job on what he spoke to. And so yeah, it resonates, and I think it resonates across the board. And really, I think there's the veterans, who we've shed that pride, and seen through the lies, and followed the truth, and followed the money, no matter how painful it is, right? To have your world turned upside down, and to have that Superman that you believed in not really be what you were taught, and what you were taught with propaganda to believe in, it's hard. So I would ask those veterans that haven't shed that pride, that national pride that divides, that blinds us to humanity, to killing other people, to watching a genocide unfold, and our tax dollars going for that, like to be silent in the face of what that stands for and the segregation that it creates, the apartheid, the genocide. Um, it's just, as veterans, especially as veterans, we have got to step up and put our lives on the line for humanity. We did it for the empire, and that's what it's time for. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, no, Philip, I mean, when was your world turned upside down?
Oh gosh, and it's a whole. I mean, there's so many different factors in my belief shift, but
Well, let me
basically,
ask you this. Before you answer, or as you answer, did it happen in real time? Were you in boot camp? What happened?
no,
When was there a turning?
I'm slow. I'm a slow, deep learner. I'm sure I'm somewhere on the spectrum, but it was I got out of my service in 2002, and it took me about 8 years to kind of start researching and really get on the internet and really face and social media, really um, have the different ideas thrown at me. And for someone that was so passionate about things that matter, eventually it was a straw that broke the camel's back, and led me to do my own research out of like, I'm going to prove this person wrong, the opposition wrong. And so, yeah, it was a whole, and especially the family that I came from, was proximity to power. It was a whole life upending, shifting ordeal that almost, almost took my life, because it was such a dramatic shift, and having your whole world and everything that you believed in turned upside down. So,
Kathy Kelly, when you look at these celebrations today, I mean, well, give me your thoughts on Armistice Day, which has become Veterans Day, um, and how we celebrate this now, because I dare say we would not be hearing this conversation in corporate media. You hear it in independent media, because this would be considered blasphemy, right, by the corporations who own the corporate media. So,
Well, Santita,
Kathy
I'm
Kelly.
so touched that you started us off with the story of your paternal grandfather who said, "Baby, don't leave the room."
Yeah.
He wanted that next generation, which was you, to get this new perspective at a young age. And what a memory to have. I think that you'd like to think, oh, people are going to learn from the last war. And they almost did. That Mike described the industrialized slaughter after World War I, and there was a resolute movement across this country. No more. We've had it up to here. I've mentioned this Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal a number of us worked on, and we realized, oh my gosh, there were 100 hearings held in the U.S. Senate trying to put the war profiteers, who were already getting bloated in their avarice and their greed and the amount of money they were taking in and keeping to themselves. But they fought back. And so what Mike described, there's been a constant fight being waged by some very savvy, reckless, powerful people. And I see Phil with the keffiyeh, knowing that he's just come back from risking his life on the Mediterranean, and what I think was a miracle on the Mediterranean, because it represented so much conscientious objection. But I also am thinking that in Gaza, winter is coming. People have, plywood maybe, and plastic maybe, and tarps, and Israel, provisioned by the United States, still protected by the United States, continues to assure that the reconstruction materials people desperately need, latrines and tents and blankets and coats and ways to winterize, because winter is coming, they're going to keep it out. And if any goes in, it'll only go to the half of Gaza now occupied by the Israeli Defense Forces. Well, one writer, and he's kind of safe, he's in Denmark, but he's from Gaza. He said Gaza is the canary in the coal mine. Now, I thought, well, okay, things get bad, but we're not going to be treated like people. And well, the surveillance that's being used to target the 262 Gazan journalists that have been assassinated, that surveillance has been developed by U.S. corporations. And that surveillance has tracked the doctors and the healthcare workers and assassinated many of them or made sure that they're locked up. Well, why wouldn't that be turned on whoever? And so how do the ICE people and the people entering in military garb into our cities, how do they know who they're supposed to go after? And so maybe if we can't learn from the past wars because of what was done to the people that we slaughtered, maybe, and I don't recommend fear as a motive for anyone, but maybe this Armistice Day, we can start to learn about what could be coming around the corner as we face ecological collapse and we throw our money into the Pentagon and the squandering of the military institutions, really. And the other thing I'd want to say is that if anybody wants to really respect the military, then I think it's incumbent on that person at least to open just a few chapters of the Special Inspector General on Afghan reconstruction and get a load of the ghost schools and the ghost hospitals and the ghost facilities that were constructed. There was no such thing. They just made them up and pocketed the money. And then go back to the Special Inspector General on Iraq reconstruction. And it's the same thing. When Phil says hand over fist, you just got to imagine these greedy fists saying, oh, there's some more money to grab. We wrecked Vietnam. We wrecked Iraq. We wrecked Afghanistan. Gaza is wrecked. But there are people who can dream of the Gaza Riviera and whose avarice seems to know no end. But I think those people are also in some ways motivated by fear. So we shouldn't let ourselves be motivated by fear. We should be motivated by what your grandfather was trying to let loose with, which was truth force. And he came by it through hard lessons.
And and I became so full when I thought about him today. And then I thought about my mother's brother who went to Vietnam, and he proudly went to Vietnam as my mother was protesting our involvement there. And she said he came back a completely different person. And I could see that broke her heart. Just complete, and he died very young. And having had a successful career, but many people in the family felt that Agent Orange got him. I mean, it's just, you just keep on looking. And I've seen, different examples, but I tell you, that moment with my grandfather, Philip, I know you can't stay with us much longer, but that moment with my grandfather, it will stay with me forever. I didn't realize just how foundational it is to me. Not just because that was the last time I saw him alive, but I said, as you pointed out, Miss Kathy, he asked me not to leave the room. He said, no, I want you to hear this. And I'm wondering, just as you came into this awareness, Philip, where are you now? I mean, do you need to talk to anyone to work through this? Because that's a part of our veterans' lives that we don't really want to talk about, Mike and Miss Kathy, just the moral injury. So help me to understand where you are right now.
I mean, I don't really know that I have the self-awareness to know exactly where I am in regards to the moral injury and stuff of being sold the lies, and really just more so, and what we've all been going through is watching a live stream genocide for the last 2 years.
Well, hold on, but what drives you to risk your life now for peace? You were willing to risk your life for war, but now you flipped it.
Right. Yeah. And it's because I see through the pride, right? For me personally, in my awakening and my awareness of self-awareness and stuff, um, it's hard to say exactly where I am. But it's been a long journey and hard journey, for sure. So,
Well, what do you
you,
want? What do you want for Gaza now? Because indeed, many people feel that that is the pivotal struggle of our time. Even as we are looking at what 90 bombings in Somalia this year alone by the United States. Um, I mean, we can go around the world, and we're at the center of so much. Um, what do you want us to know about? Do you think that because Americans are growing more sensitive to Gaza? I mean, I remember when I was very young, um, you could not, we had a no talk policy with the Palestinians about the Palestinians. Miss Kathy and Mike, you remember that. And that was something, you just did not mention it because the tragedy of the October 7th and after that is that we think that this started, that the killing of the Palestinians just started. The Nakba never ended,
right.
and we're at the center of it. Do you feel any responsibility, Philip?
For sure, and especially with my family ancestry, of being a descendant of an original 300 settler alongside Stephen F. Austin, and wiping out the indigenous people that my ancestors did, and then having an ancestor same side, that owned a slave. Like,
Mhm.
it's something that I can't do on my watch. I know too much now, right? And as a person that looks like me, and has my privilege, who's been on the, if we're going to make the analogy to, an amusement park, who's been riding the rides over and over and over again and not getting off, and there's this long line of humans that want to ride the ride just to have, then that ride is equality and equity and equal rights, right? And people that want self-determination. And so, yeah, that's where we are. But to speak of, like, the former question that I got sidetracked on, and I apologize for that. Why do I risk my life now on the line? Is because we're humans. I can see across that pride that was instilled in us, right, as Americans, and love is not proud, right? So, and I speak to this, in carpentry terms of what proud means. It means proud means that you can't, that it's in front of, right? That it's not flush, it's not equal. And so love is not proud. Unconditional love is not proud. That's why we can't serve God and country at the same time, right? Because God says, "Thou shalt not kill," and then country says, "Thou shalt kill." And so it is a complete contradiction, and they can't live in the same space at the same time, because you wind up loving one and hating the other. And so for me, like, God is unconditional love, and serving that force of unconditional love extends to other human beings. And I have shed that pride and that ego because it's blinding to humanity, right? And it helps me see that my life is no more valuable than a Palestinian child.
Mhm. Mike Ferner, when you are looking, as you wrestle with how to gently, as you put it, respond to these young people, I mean, where are you with that? I mean, how do you respond to these young people? Um, you would have been responding to Philip at one point, right? And I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I think these are high school students, and first of all, I treat them like adults, and assume that they are pretty smart people, and you just start to deconstruct what we've been told. And you can't do that in one letter or one phone call or anything like that. It's a process. But hopefully, if there's any value in me writing back to them at all, it will be that they've started to reflect on what they've been told and start to look at the world in such a way that this business about the good guys and bad guys in the United States always being for freedom and democracy, that they'll be able to start to see through that even a little bit. Because I think that first unraveling is the most important. Once you are able to do that, you can start understanding that a lot of what we've been told about this empire is not true, and that it's been told to us for a real reason. That's one of the things that I'm coming to realize now. I mean, as long as I've been thinking about this stuff, it just struck me the other day that it's been how many generations since the First World War, how many generations since Vietnam, and every generation is fed from the time they can hear and see. They are fed the same story. You're living in the greatest country in the world. No place else is like this. Everything we do is for the good. We're always for freedom and democracy. And this is what young people get filled up with, as soon as they start participating in any sort of discourse at all, at home or in school. And so that happens every generation. And these corporations that have got the money and they've got an institutional memory. They go back to as far back as you want to go, but going back to the First World War, the profits that Kathy talked about, those congressional hearings exposed, those profits went into building the General Motors company and on and on and on. And these corporations profit from blowing things up, and they profit from building them. So they have a game, like on your show before we've mentioned, the way Smedley Butler put it, or the racket, and it's a worldwide racket, and the rich profit and the rest of us pay. So, but you don't understand that until hopefully some critical thinking starts to come in, and then our education system isn't geared to really focus on critical thinking, because that doesn't help the system. We've got a system that relies on people getting through whatever education they're going to experience and coming out the other side still being true believers. And so that's why groups like Kathy's group and what she's done over the years, and Veterans for Peace, that's why these efforts are so important. And just to get back for just a moment with Phil, Veterans for Peace has performed a real valuable function, in my opinion, because we've worked with veterans, young men and women who have had their world turned upside down, or are wondering, what the hell did I do? And we're able to take time and be with them and listen to them. And I've heard over and over from Veterans for Peace members how this work that they do for trying to make peace and establishing these relationships with new members and younger veterans has been one of the most helpful things to them that they've ever been able to do. So, we've just got a lot of bullshit to get through that we've been fed for a long, long time. And luckily, there are independent media places like your show, Santita, where our voices can come through at least a little bit. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Well, Philip, I know you can't stay with us long. Let me ask you this: when Uh, when you're thanked for your service, Desmond wanted to thank, let me just say that because I think it's important for him to be able to say this. He said, for any veterans that are here, thank you for your service. And there are veterans who are here. Um, how does that make you feel?
Um, it's different, and it's different these days, right? Especially as we see what happened and what is happening. Um, I think, like I said, that the service that I did when I was in, and I think Mike and so many of us others, is we served one another, right? We served the people. Um, and that's who our service was to. It was to our brothers and sisters and siblings beside us and in front of us and behind us, that went through the same hellscape, um, and saw the same thing, and just unnatural man-made killing. And so when I hear thank you for your service, I do say thank you, because I think it comes from a good place. But my service that I'm most proud of is my service to humans and the humanitarian aspect of my life now, and the organizing aspect. That's the service that I am most proud of, and not so much of being duped, but I am proud to have served alongside um, of my siblings while I was in. But I am so proud, and not um, in the pride kind of way, but like in the right, for doing the right thing way and serving humanity, to serve alongside these amazing peace activists like Kathy and Mike, and what I formerly described as like heroes that I never knew I had, that have been fighting for peace for so long. And so, yeah, it's just the trailblazing, right, that happens, and across generations, and for the same struggle that's been going on across the board, right, is going on. And I just want to say that they tell us what's important to them. They tell us that voting is important to them by suppressing the vote, right? If we can get the system right back to with ranked choice voting and having legitimate third party. But they tell us what matters, and they're telling us that with Palestine and free speech and guarding Israel, is that it matters. And so that is why, like, they are staking like everything on Palestine. And so that is why this matters for everybody. And if I can just say before I have to go, and thank you so much for having me on, Santita, and so good to see Kathy and Mike, is that, right now there are two fronts that I'm pushing on, for the Uniting for Peace, and also for the UN, and then also to bring Mohammed Ibrahim, who's a 16-year-old American Floridian citizen boy, home from Israeli torture camp, and what we saw and witnessed when we were illegally kidnapped by Israel on the flotilla for trying to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. And we just got a glimpse of the Israeli prison, and the racism that exists, and the toxicity. And it got me to like thinking, which I've had this thought before, but just the way that the racism and the toxicity, that I observed and absorbed, um, is like having the KKK run the prison system and judicial system here. That is what the Palestinians are going through. And oh, by the way, that realization was like, that is what's going on here, and that is what has been going on here. And for-profit prisons, right, and the prison system, and we have that with ICE now with the GEO group, and so it's all connected. The war machine and capitalism, and it runs on lives, and it runs on exploitation of people like us, with humans with big hearts that love each other as humans, on the exploitation and the killings of us, and for profit. So that's what I want to end with. And thank you so much for having me on. I've got to run to a different event. It's so good to see everybody.
May
Thank you.
God bless you, Phil Tottenham.
Thank
Veterans
you.
for
Awesome.
Peace,
Thank
sending
you.
his so love. Kathy Kelly, um, what is a world beyond war?
Well, we wouldn't imagine reforming the dueling that people once engaged in. You abolish dueling. It's not a very good idea. We wouldn't imagine reforming child labor. Not that it doesn't go on in the world, but at least in the United States, it's kind of against the law to have little children working in horrid factories all day long in bad conditions. So I respect World Beyond War because they're not looking to reform the military. They're not looking for, a better war. Like, we don't like this war, but this war we kind of like. World Beyond War is very blunt, and there's no nuance. This organization is against all war. The T-shirts say, "I'm already against the next war." And I think there's a Quaker, I get my Quakers mixed up. I deeply respect them, but I think it was William Penn, who was asked, "When will I know when it's time to put down the sword?" And he said, "Friend, thee will know when thou canst no longer pick it up. It's too heavy." And I think that's what conscientious objection is about. You get to a point where you just can't do this anymore. Now, I have to say, I was pretty young. I was at St. Ignatius College Prep. I must have been, I don't know, 28 or 29. And I went to the treasurer and I asked him, "John, could you please lower my salary beneath the taxable income?" And, I think he was trying to think through his Rolodex in his head, what's the number for the school psychiatrist? This child is nuts. But I did that. I went down to $3,000 a year as my salary. And what a liberation, what a relief to think, okay, at least I'm doing that much objection. But it just wasn't enough. And so I think when they get bitten by the bug of conscientious objection, they can't flip that. You know too much, in a sense. And that's what I think we were hearing from Phil, that he now suddenly is overwhelmed by how much he knows. Oh my goodness, what a quick learning procession from going to the fast, which just, took the starch out of all of us, really. For 40 days, he was fasting across from the UN. And then next thing I know, he's on that boat to go into Gaza. And that was like risking, but the way the prisoners were treated gave them a real inkling into just how bad it is. And now we're hearing about prisoners' bodies being returned from Israeli prisons with many signs of torture. And I guess it's what you expect when people are learning day after day after day. It's a good idea to kill people who threaten you, and you are threatened. So it's hard to turn that around, but I think we should celebrate the conscientious objectors today, and that's been happening all across the country because of peace.
What is a conscientious objector? Just so that we can all sing from the same sheet of music.
Well, actually, if you want to get that status, Mike would know a lot more about it, but you can't just decide after you get conscripted, oh, guess what, I'm a conscientious objector. It works out much better if you decide at an early age and you save every paper you ever wrote, and it hasn't been by a chatbot, and you save every interview and every demonstration you went to and every relative who's willing to put something in your folder. And so for a young person like the ones who wrote to Mike, whom I hope were not chatbots, those youngsters possibly could be persuaded by Mike. Why not start your file now to become a conscientious objector? And Pax Christi USA has now made that front and center one of their main campaigns. So a conscientious objector is somebody who says, in conscience, I can't go along with this. And conscientious objectors to militarism refuse. And they do it at their own risk.
Would you like to elaborate on that, Mike Ferner? I mean, and how does a conscientious objector, how are they saluted on Veterans Day, on Armistice Day? How do they process?
Well,
I salute you, Mike Ferner.
Oh boy.
Well, you all make I mean, the way you take us into a space about war, Bill Tottenham, you, Kathy Kelly, you, Mike Ferner, that we don't have the opportunity to have these discussions on a broader platform.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Yeah.
So
well, what I'd like to respond to your question, Santita. People say thank you for your service, and unfortunately, we haven't come up with a bumper sticker sized response to that, because it's easy to say thank you for your service or support the troops, and everybody knows what that shorthand means. But I have a excerpt from an essay that Matt Ho wrote today. And he's one of the most articulate people in Veterans for Peace. And Matt is a good example of the casualties of war that we have no idea about, because he has had traumatic brain injury so bad that his functioning, I mean, he does a wonderful job, but he can't always maintain that level of functionality. And I would love to have him be the director of Veterans for Peace. He'd be the best director we ever had, but he's not able to take those kind of jobs that have that level of stress because of what happened to him in Iraq and Afghanistan. And look at that, people who might want to go to medical school who can't take that stress because of what they've been on and on and on. And those are the people we lose. So anyway, Matt wrote this essay today, and it was about the thanks for your service business. And if I could just read a couple of sentences out of there, he says, the idea is to promote the notion of supporting the troops and supporting the troops because of their sacrifice, because they are the heroes in the story of good versus evil. We are the men and women with the white hats. We are going to make the world safe for democracy. Support the troops then becomes a mechanism through which dissent is suppressed. Any opposition to American military intervention, occupation, or war is met with a rhetoric of support the troops, the shouting down of those who have legitimate dissent towards U.S. warfare, which means you're simply not patriotic. You're betraying these young men and women who are over there. How dare you? What that morphs into then is a clergy-like status, a deification of the American military. And this idea of support the troops becomes thank you for the service, thank you for your service, a ritual-like obligation among the American people who have no idea what they're really saying.
When you hear the president who now wants to use the military he wants to use the American people as objects of practice. Mm-hmm. What does that say to you? I mean, beyond posse comitatus, which of course was instituted after the Civil War, where you're not supposed to deploy troops on Americans, right? Because we haven't even gotten over that war. We're still litigating the Civil War. Mm-hmm. That was 160 years ago, plus. What do you say? I mean, Mike?
Well, our organization and others are doing our best to get in touch with Guards members in various states and let them know that they have an obligation to refuse illegal orders, and not only that, but that there will be support for them if they do. And so that's one thing, but it's hard to get to a whole lot, a very large percentage of the people that are in the Guard. But I think if that happens, and we're seeing it already without, quote, practicing on the American public, but just some of the deployments that are being done now, we're already hearing from some of them saying, this is not what I signed up for. And I think if it's done on a large scale, it's going to blow up in their face, because the people who join the Guard do that for a lot of reasons, school benefits and healthcare benefits and so forth, because we don't have that in society like we should. But they also do it to be part of something bigger than themselves and to serve other people. And when they feel like they're being taken advantage of and told to do something that they are not, that is not why they joined, it's going to resonate with a lot of them. And I don't think that's going to get very far. At least I certainly hope not.
We have a few minutes left here. I want to find out from each of you just where, as Dr. King wrote 60 years ago, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Oh, that's elicited a smile from you, Kathy Kelly.
Well, in all my years of being in Chicago, I have almost never seen front page sympathetic coverage of civil disobedience.
Yeah.
But the Saturday issue of the Chicago Tribune featured moms, 14 mothers, sitting down, holding a peaceful sit-in. You were immediately attracted to them as the people you'd want to support, not the troops that were going to arrest them. And they were arrested, but they did it at the Broadview ICE facility. And they are really concerned about troops breaking, or ICE people breaking into their children's schools and taking away their children's caregivers, and so many instances. So Chicago is reeling, but it's also responding. And you see it happening in the neighborhoods. I mean, now they've got on social media a way to notify a certain social media app, and 1,000 people will turn up, and people have whistles, and everybody knows one whistle means they're this way, two toots and it's this way. So people, this is something a bit new. And I think when Mike mentions the National Guard, they've all got employers and families and coworkers who might be wondering, what the hell is going on here? We don't have our employees that we need to do whatever it is we're doing. And they're off in Chicago, and people in Chicago don't want them. And people in Portland are dressed up in, inflatable costumes saying everything's fine. So I think that President Trump will become more and more evidently as compromised as President Biden. And in some ways, we're even worse off. Although Biden purchased the Gaza war for us.
Well, Mike Ferner, what do you want us to know on this Veterans Day? How should we be thinking? What should we be thinking of?
I'd like to leave people with the thought that, first of all, there is no glory in war. And I think sometimes young people are mistaken and think that that's part of the package because that's what we've been sold. There is no glory in war. And secondly, to really think about veterans as the rest of society. I hope people think before they say thank you for your service. I mean, you don't even know this person. You have no idea what they did. How about just a hello or how are you or something like that? Veterans do not belong on any kind of a pedestal. If anybody belongs there, it's teachers and healthcare workers and people who've done the kind of stuff that Kathy Kelly have done, not veterans. Veterans are on those stupid pedestals now only because that serves the empire in the long run. So I just hope that through opportunities like you provide with your show, that people can start thinking about this a little differently.
Well, and it's hard to believe it, everyone, but we do have a former president who'd been the top general in the Second World War, General Eisenhower, who became president, Dwight Eisenhower, who wrote a book entitled Waging Peace. It's hard to believe that we would have a president who then warned us as he was leaving office about the dangers of the encroachment. He says spiritual and material of the military-industrial complex. He was going to put congressional in it, but his advisor said no. The military is quite enough, Dwight, or sir. So it's something to think about. And Mike Ferner, you make the point. Thanking teachers, garbage workers, farmers for their service. Just very quickly, I'd like to find out from you and Miss Kathy. Why don't we thank, the janitors, the frontline workers who went to work without PPEs during the pandemic, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
why don't we thank others for their service?
We've been bamboozled. We've been bamboozled into thinking that 1 hour of one person's time, say a doctor, is worth 8 hours or 16 hours of a childcare worker's time or a custodian's time or a bus driver's time. And that's ridiculous. Why we say, oh, well, that's because the doctor had to work so hard and spend so much money to get to that point. But what if we were to say, well, that's a big privilege in society to be in a situation where you get to help people. But that doesn't mean that you should be able to make 8 times more than somebody else who's helping you because they're taking care of your children. So we get bamboozled into thinking these relationships are just the only game in town. But we don't have to think that way, and we ought not to.
Well, Mike Ferner, your thoughts about service and how we perceive it. And correctional officer for the lockdown says I disagree. I guarded and safeguarded nuclear weapons while being armed with my assault weapon while standing on a flight line for an hour in minus 20-degree weather. I hear you.
And I would ask that person who think about who you were serving. Why were there those nuclear weapons that had to be guarded? And why do we have a country that produces this kind of a system whereby people have to stand out in minus 20-degree weather to guard nuclear weapons? I mean, why does all this happen? And does it need to happen? And that's not to say that I think less of what that person did. It's just that we're part of a system that uses and abuses working class people, basically, to make sure that the people that are running the show can continue to do that. And that would be my response.
What would you like to say? Well, what thought would you like to leave us with on Armistice Day?
I'd like to leave people with the idea that one of the best things you can do today is go back to a poem written by a British lieutenant who was killed a week before the armistice in 1918. His name was Wilfred Owen. And go back and read some of his poetry, and particularly one that's called Dulce et Decorum Est. And he talks about, he just spills it out in real life terms.
If you could but hear at every jolt the blood come gargling forth from frost-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitten as the vile cud of incurable sores on innocent tongues, you would not say with such high zest, my friend, to children ardent for some desperate glory, dulce e decorum est, pro patria mori. Sweet and honorable it is to die for your country.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy Kelly. World Beyond War. Thank you, Mike Ferner. Veterans for Peace. Thank you, Phil Tottenham. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Santita, and blessings on your grandfather.
God bless you.
Bless you both.
Thank you. AM 950 Radio. This is Charles Henry Jackson's granddaughter signing off.